This is Eddie Muller, coming to you today from our temporary digs at the Grand Lake Theater in Oakland, California. Today we have a first for Noir Alley, an introduction to the introduction. Today's film was originally scheduled to air on April 18th of last year, the weekend of the TCM Classic Film Festival. When a certain virus forced us to cancel the festival, the whole thing was moved on air, as we'll do again this year. Unfortunately, that meant bumping Barbara Stanwyck, which is never a good idea, even under drastic circumstances. But as I long ago learned producing live events, you never cancel, you just postpone. So, better late than never, let's time travel back to pre-pandemic days and the original Noir Alley set. I'll see you after the outro. This is Noir Alley, and I'm Eddie Muller, your host for weekly excursions into the dark side of cinema. This week I'm pleased to welcome back to our little corner of the TCM universe the greatest actress ever, Barbara Stanwyck. We put out the welcome mat for her a few times, including top-shelf noirs such as Double Indemnity and The Strange Love of Martha Ivers. But today we're showing a film that rarely gets mentioned among her vast filmography, noir or otherwise. It's Witness to Murder, a United Artists feature that may have more resonance today, especially for women, than it did for critics and viewers when it was released in 1954. Stanwyck was 46 years old when she made this picture. A decade earlier, in The Lady Eve, Ball of Fire, and Double Indemnity, she was the screen's sharpest and sexiest actress. But by the time she made Witness to Murder, Stanwyck was entrenched in her middle-aged period. Her wavy mane had been trimmed to the conservative style of the times, and Edith Head was no longer exclusively designing eye-popping outfits for her. Stanwyck, who was always a freelancer, now had to search for leading roles appropriate for an actress of her stature and age. To her credit, she was up to the challenge, and she did it without embarrassing herself trying to play younger than she really was. She could have given Joan Crawford some pointers. In Witness to Murder, she plays Cheryl Draper, a professional woman who witnesses a murder in the apartment across from hers. The culprit is arrogant, affluent society snob, played by, who else? George Sanders. And oh yeah, he's a Nazi to boot. So guess whose version of the story the police believe? This movie is a classic he said, she said story, which, like I said, may resonate more today than it did at the time. Now, despite some economy-sized plot holes, a lot of you will be on the edge of your seats as this one spools out, and you'll probably be gritting your teeth over the demeaningly sexist way Cheryl gets treated in this story. I might even argue that the film has a proto-feminist slant. But I say might argue that because, frankly, I'm afraid Stanwyck would come back and sock me if I did say it. She had no use for politicized interpretations of her work. But regardless, when you look at later Stanwyck films like Witness to Murder, Crime of Passion, and even Douglas Sirk's vastly underrated There's Always Tomorrow, it's impossible to not see the actress choosing roles that spoke directly to the marginalization of women. After all, she was fighting not to be marginalized in the movie business as she neared 50 years of age. The script is an original by Chester Erskine, who also produced. Erskine was an interesting character with an eclectic and somewhat spotty resume. Although he'd produced, directed, and written prestigious productions on both Broadway and in Hollywood, in the early 50s, much of his sporadic work was in the crime genre. Just prior to this, he'd had two stories, Angel Face and Split Second, turned into good noirs at RKO. Although Erskine was also a director, for this one he opted to turn the helm over to Roy Rowland, whose big breakthrough in the movies was marrying the niece of Louis B. Mayer. And not to suggest that Rowland lacked talent, but with the notable exception of Dr. Seuss's The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T, he rarely mustered much visual inventiveness on screen. Rowland was what actors call a traffic cop. He was capable of directing a good script adequately, but not too inspired to make something better out of a script that was merely serviceable. That's where a director of photography can save the day, which is certainly the case here. Erskine had the savvy to hire the best of the best, John Alton. Any chance of this film assuming the flat, low-contrast patina that studios began using for black and white films in the mid-50s evaporated the moment Alton gaffed his first setup. His cinematography accentuates Cheryl's paranoia as she struggles to get someone to believe she's telling the truth about her nefarious neighbor. Like Stanwyck, Alton preferred to freelance. Unattached to any one studio, he offered his talents at fair market value to a wide array of producers. And it is a treat to see two huge talents, Stanwyck and Alton, working their magic in the same movie. They'd make two more together after this, both with director Alan Dwan, Cattle Queen of Montana, released later this same year, and Escape to Burma in 1955. Co-starring Gary Merrill as the good cop, who may be more exasperating than the villain, here are George Sanders and Barbara Stanwyck in Witness to Murder.